Hi, I'm DJ Sixsmith. You're watching The Sit Down. Behind the Red Door, brand new book from this woman right here. It's Megan Collins. Megan, how are you? Welcome.
I'm good. Thanks for having me here.
You got it. So you got both your books up there in the background,
Hey.
which is awesome. And this is your second book here. So what was it like diving into this story compared to writing your first book? How are they different?
Well, when I wrote The Winter Sister, my debut, I didn't necessarily know that I was writing within the thriller psychological suspense genre. It was more like I just knew I had this certain story to tell. And so I started to tell it. And then once it was published and started getting marketed in the thriller genre, I was like, okay, yeah, I see how that fits. So when I was writing Behind the Red Door, I was much more conscious of that decision of how it would be delivered to readers and what readers might be expecting. So I definitely had that in the back of my mind. I still told the story that I wanted to tell. I didn't have to compromise with anything. But I definitely was thinking about, okay, what are readers' expectations? How can I divert their expectations a little bit? So yeah, I think that was the biggest difference between the two.
I'm sure it's pretty interesting that you can play with that in terms of what the audience is expecting, what you're trying to do. And also just with this genre, like there is so much to unpack. And with the story of a kidnap and the potential connection to it, clearly a lot going on there. So what was it like for you to just work through all those different layers with this book?
It was a lot because I think I always put my characters through a lot. I feel bad for them. But so I needed to make sure I was balancing the plot that always needed to keep moving forward and keep the reader wanting to know what's going to happen with the emotional story of the character. And this woman who has a lot of anxiety, she sees a therapist for anxiety, she's on medication for it. And so when she starts to feel like she has this connection to this kidnapping victim from a long time ago who's now gone missing again, she's kind of like, okay, is that real or is that my anxiety? And so that's the start of her journey. And then it kind of goes into all these other places. And so it's definitely a balancing act, making sure that you're keeping everything moving and keeping everything suspenseful, but also being authentic to what's going on with your character and creating an arc that is going to be a satisfying journey for them overall.
I think that authenticity is super important because whether you've actually been through an experience like a kidnap or you can just relate to that person, like a lot of people start to feel that anxiety when they see a story in the news like that. So what was it like playing with that idea where it's like, I may not be directly connected to this, but I'm feeling this right now in a way that I didn't anticipate?
Yeah, well, so Fern's character, who has all that anxiety, she, her character isn't based off of myself, but the anxiety definitely is. I have the same kind of anxiety, and it really dictates the way that I view the world, the way I think about things. Like I'm always kind of like, okay, where's the danger in this situation? Everybody's saying, okay, everything's fine here. I know it's not. And that's how kind of an anxious brain works. And so I really wanted to see that on the page because I hadn't really seen the kind of anxiety that I experience in a book before. And I really want to explore that. So I think that's how definitely I was able to tap into that character because a lot of those anxious type of thoughts she's had are the kinds of thoughts I've had, even if they're not about this specific thing. I was able to, it was kind of a cathartic experience actually, being able to create a character who you can show the reader, you know, this person isn't crazy because they're having these anxious thoughts. That's just how her brain works. And it's a struggle. So that in that respect, it was really easy to tap into that.
You hit on a lot of really important things there because even in a world where we talk about mental health and we've identified anxiety, not everybody understands what that really means, what it understands to live through like that. And also just the fact that your experience, you've never seen that before. What were some of the toughest parts of just writing a character, even though it was different from you? What were some of the toughest things in terms of going into your own mental space and thinking about your own anxiety?
Well, it it was kind of like a double-edged sword, or I don't even know if that's the correct term, but because on the one hand, like I said, it was cathartic to be able to write that, but on the other hand, when I am writing about someone who's constantly looking for the danger out there, it kind of feeds my own anxiety too. So, but I think that overall the experience was really good for me as a writer and as someone who deals with anxiety. And yeah, I think that, you know, things like anxiety, depression, we still have this view that people can just like, oh, you're depressed, like go do something fun, you'll feel better. Like, no, that's not how it is. Like, these are how people's brains work. And so so for me, it was a really fulfilling experience as a writer to try to bring that to the page and try to hopefully get readers to see that, you know, it's not something you can just turn off. It's something you kind of have to live with and find, you know, various people find different ways to live with it. And this specific character does ultimately too. So yeah, it was definitely fed into my own personal fears, but at the same time, it was kind of therapeutic.
I'm really glad you had the runway to get through all that in this book. And I think it's really important to talk about. And, you know, I think it's really cool that you've defined your narrative voice too when it comes to your writing. So how long did that take? Because you mentioned the process with your first book, but when did it really feel comfortable diving into this genre with this specific voice?
I mean, I think that, so I wrote a couple of novels before my debut got published, and they weren't in that like suspense thriller genre. They were more like what I guess it gets classified as women's fiction. But there was definitely always a dark edge to them, which I think was part of why I had trouble selling them, was that like they were sort of in that women's fiction realm, but that there was like a darkness there that was a little harder to market in that category. So I think that voice has kind of always been in me, and I just didn't know that this was the genre that where I can play all of those things out and really explore that. And so once I saw what I had done with the Winter Sister and how I really did fit into this genre that I didn't even know I was writing into, I just committed to that even more with Behind the Red Door. And I think that's something that people have said that have read both, is that Behind the Red Door gets even darker, gets kind of like creepier in a way that the Winter Sister didn't, and that it's even like a little more disturbing. And so I think I've just like really leaned into that darkness, and I don't know, I have a lot of fun doing that.
Hey, I think that's great. And I think it's really important too, because you're showing these three-dimensional women characters that we haven't necessarily seen before. And even for you as an author to dive into that world, what does it mean to you that you're kind of pushing through, leaning into something that hasn't necessarily been, you know, status quo throughout the literary world?
Well, yeah, I when I created these two main characters of Fern and Astrid, Astrid is the woman who goes missing, and we see her voice in the book through excerpts from her memoir, which she published about her time being kidnapped as a kid. So I had to create these two kind of distinct voices for Fern and Astrid. And I knew that readers wouldn't necessarily love both of these characters, that I've heard certain things about Fern that like, oh, she can be kind of annoying, people say, because she has this one relationship in her life that she just does not see clearly the way that readers do. And so she keeps going back there and expecting something that's not going to be there. And so I knew that would be annoying, but that's her journey. And I really wanted that to be seen, because I think that that is a very real situation. And then with Astrid, she can be very prickly. She's sort of rebellious, which I love. But I think that there's this push for women writers in particular to create these like perfect victims and perfect female characters. And you know, I like to play with that and push the envelope on, okay, well, what would make them unlikable? I hate that term because we don't use it for male characters, but what would make them unlikable, but still something that you want to see what happens to them on their journey. And like, for me personally, I don't find them unlikable. Like, I have a lot of empathy for both of these characters, but I think that annoying tag gets put onto different characters a lot. And I don't know, I'm okay with it.
It's BS that there's a double standard for male characters and women characters. And also just the fact that like you put something out there, you think it's going to be received one way, and then people have a totally different way of receiving it. So what have been some of the other surprises? Not only like this character is annoying, but what else has kind of shocked you in terms of how people have responded to this one?
I think that I wasn't shocked, but I'm surprised, I guess, at like the response where people are like, everybody in this book except for Fern is just a garbage person, and like, and I don't think that's true. I mean, she has a wonderful husband who like I built to be a very kind, stable person because she needs it, because she hasn't really had that, and so I don't think they're talking about him, but the focus on these characters being so unlikable is interesting to me because they are like her parents were not good parents. I built them to be bad parents because I'm really interested in the idea of what it looks like to be a bad parent when we have so much expectation about what parents should be like. But I wanted those characters to be interesting too. So like, you don't like them, but they're interesting. They have a weird certain charm that's kind of creepy or whatever it is. And so I think, and I've received that response from people that they're interested in these characters, but they're like, oh, don't want to ever meet them. But then there's some people that I think it's really hard to look at like what a family situation looks like that really is not healthy. And I totally get that. Like, that's really hard.
A lot to chew on with this book. Behind the Red Door, new one from Megan Collins. Megan, thanks so much. Best of luck with this, and we'll talk to you down the road, all right?
Thank you so much.